But let's head over to the NL side of things as those mighty Mets and how good they've really been for the second half of the year.
Fuck you.
Their magic comes to an end. They lose in 6 games to a Dodgers team that was averaging over 7 runs a game in this series. Well, I think the bats are obviously the big thing we talk about with Dodgers, rightfully so. How do the Yankees stop what is coming? Because this is a lineup that is just hitting right now.
Out of all people, stop Tommy Edman. Didn't think that would be the key point going into the series. I mean, Otani has been held in check fairly well when there comes to no runners on base. If there's a runner in scoring position, good luck. But this past series, Freddie Freeman is banged up. Teoscar Hernandez, until the last game of the series, hadn't had a hit. It was Tommy Edman coming into the clutch a lot, but I mean the lineup as a whole right now from everyone, not just a couple of the big names, have really contributed. So I think the problem is that they finally have everything clicking and everything's clicking at the right time. So you just gotta keep them within striking distance of if you're the Yankees, and hopefully you can outslug them.
Do you think for the Dodgers that they're in this series that their pitching does become a factor in terms of I mean they have Flaherty out there, right? And he's
He's right now their game one starter.
right, and you have him and Bueller, but like eh, does it finally wear down for them at some point? Because it again, much like the Tigers, it feels like they have like one guy they can really rely on to start a game and go deep. Uh I don't know. Does that come back to bite them?
It depends on how the Yankees attack the Dodgers in the first couple games, because if the Dodgers bullpen gets exposed early in the series, and I think it could be a huge issue for them moving forward. But if they can get a stellar outing from Flaherty, or at least 6 innings, I'd say, and another 6 innings from Yamamoto, then I think Roberts has kind of got the cards set up so that he can play things out similar to how he did in the Mets series. And I think that he could get similar results. But it's hard to really say what'll happen until after we've had the first couple games.
Yeah, and yeah, again, Yamamoto there as well. But it just feels like I mean, they're going to be a team that really rotates through pitchers too, and look, I think that's definitely becoming a more modern part of the game, and I think you might see more of that in the future, but it's so young in that process that we'll kind of see how it plays out. But it's funny, man. As you said, Tommy Edman, the contributions that he's had, Chris Taylor, obviously in a limited role, but he's come in and done his thing. Enrique Hernandez is just the greatest postseason performer ever, apparently. And it's these guys that once again, it was kind of the same story as the Yankees. It was early in the year when the Dodgers were not getting off to their, what we thought was going to be a crazy start. It was okay, Mookie's hitting, Otani's hitting, Freeman's hitting, everybody else is horrible. And now you're kind of, you're getting the contribution for everybody. Max Muncy again, Edman, obviously Will Smith is still there, Pajes. So they're a scary lineup 1 through 9, and I think if you're kind of looking at the lineups, I do think the way Soto and even Stanton's playing right now, um, I think that's a scary lineup for them to face. But I think lineup wise, I would give the edge to the Dodgers, which is why I think this
Mhm.
series is going to be so close. On the side of the Mets, though. What can you really say about them, man? I mean, they had a great year. And it's just still funny to see how well they did with, and I don't say this in a disrespectful way. I think it's gonna maybe come out that way, but you have guys like Sean Manaea and Jose Quintana, like Luis Severino. They were all great pitchers at one point in time, but I mean, they really showed up in the second half of the year, and they look like like all of them look like aces out there. I mean, they really carried this team along with the clutch hitting. And they go out, but they put up a hell of a fight, and we will not have the 60th in the NL in the World Series this year. But as much as this pains you to say, Will, what are your thoughts on the Mets with their postseason run?
Like you, I'm going to try to not make this seem like a negative thing. And I know since I'm talking about the Mets, it's kind of easy to be construed that way. I think the Mets in the postseason stayed very true to themselves, and that's what got them as far as they did. The Brewers have had bullpen issues in the past and in the postseason, and that's what was their downfall this time. The Phillies just did not show up, but the Mets were consistent all the way out. It seemed like in the postseason, they would stay around enough in the first 5 or 6 innings. They would bust it open late in the games once they got into whatever the hole was for each team. I think the problem was they just ran into a Dodgers team that what we thought was going to be an issue ended up not being an issue in their pitching, and their offense stepped up the extra bit it needed to. If it really need, I mean, it didn't really need to. I don't think there was ever truly a game except for maybe half of the final game where it was actually a close matchup. It was like blowout by the Dodgers, pretty decent blowout by the Mets, blowout by the Dodgers twice. So it was just a high scoring series. And the Dodgers pitching in the end was able to stay true the entire time. And Dave Roberts did not make a screw up, or at least one that cost him the series.
It's true. And he's been known to do that in the past, but as you said, yeah, 9-0 in the first game, 7-3 Mets, and then 8-0 Dodgers, 10-2. I mean, they put up 10 in the final game. They
Mm-hmm.
put up 6 in a losing effort. I mean, the Dodgers just
Mm-hmm.
were continuously hitting in this series, and again, end up on top. I don't really have anything else to add further to these championship series. If we are ready to get into kind of our preview,
I guess the
for
only
this.
thing I'll say, one final thing about the Mets is, so if you remember the Mets like selling everyone last year, that was kind of the Cohen sign of, or he said that he was going to sell all these people. He was going to give the team a year or two before he thought they could really compete, but then they would have this farm system that was built well on prospects, especially because they were trading prime players, having good seasons at the moment. And now you're having a season this year where the Mets um, did a whole lot better than anyone expected. They didn't necessarily blow it out record wise. They had 89 wins, which was still respectable, and it made the wild card just barely. But I guess now I'm going to steer this question to you, Tyler.
Mhm.
Is, do you think this is a sign of the Mets to come in the next year or two, or do you think this is more of the Braves underperformed this year, so the Mets kind of found a way in, and in the end, and I mean, even the Diamondbacks, they had a weird
Yeah,
season where they had the best offense, arguably in the National League, but also had one of the worst pitching staffs and just missed the postseason by 1 game.
right.
So, do you think this is a sign of what the Mets could be doing in the near future? Or do you think they're still truly 1 or 2 years out before they are consistent heavy hitters?
I think so. I think this year will help them in being a contender because now I think they're gonna kind of be forced to make a move and try to re-sign Pete Alonso because I almost think they were content with letting him go if they were
Mm-hmm.
to either A, miss the playoffs or B, go out early. But you've seen how clutch he was for them to get them to this point. At times, obviously with a big, obviously the big home run in the Brewers series, but um, I the only question I have about them is if their pitching can continue to be this good because
Mm-hmm.
typically you have guys that are in their late 30s, like a couple of these guys that they have, and will they be able to to stay consistent another year throughout the whole year? I have questions about that. So to answer your question, I do think that they could be another wild card team next year, but I think they're probably still 1 or 2 years away from being a true legit contender. And I also just think they have to bring some reinforcements in on the offseason, so it'll be interesting to see, if they end up doing that, if they end up, kind of bringing some insurance to that pitching staff. Again, I love what Jose Quintana did this year. Can he do that again next year? Luis Severino, same thing. I mean, is this something that they can translate over to next year? I don't know, but I think if you're the Mets, your hand is kind of forced because they were the best team in baseball in the second half. So you know that you have something there, and I think you can't
Not right now.
not.
Give me a second.
You can't not. You're not muted
Not
there,
right
bud.
now. I wanted to see if
Not
you
Hi,
had
muted.
Bobby. We can hear your
something after
argument.
the fact.
Uh so yes. I do think that
Hot mic,
uh
baby.
I do think that they are about a year or two out, but yeah, again, a great season for the Mets. And again, I do think they can be in contention for that wild card spot again next year, but they got to get that Alonso deal done. I think he got a lot of crap this year from Mets fans in particular, but he's a key piece of that team, and they got to re-sign him.
Do you think the
And
Mets now are a front runner to sign Corbin Burns, or at least they're going to
uh,
try to?
I think, to be honest, I always think team like the New York teams are just because of the
Hmm.
big spending, but it makes a lot of sense. I think I part of me thinks Burns stays in Baltimore, and I think they probably move on from Santander. But yeah, I think there if there is a way that they can offer on him, I think they're going to try to pay a lot. Because again, I just get some reinforcements. You get hopefully for them a full year of Senga next year, where he'll be back to himself and not pitching an inning and getting shelled. But
I have questions about that in the long run. And I
yeah,
know it kind of worked versus the Philly series, but I mean, it also you could say didn't work out ideally because you were wanting a clean inning out of him, and he got a lot of base runners. Yet
yeah,
they won the game, and so the
yeah.
mindset was do it again. No,
Right.
one and
Well,
done was kind of good.
I think it's okay to have these, I don't know if I'm gonna call them miracle seasons, but like these seasons from these pitchers. But I think you at least have to look at the possibility of upgrading for younger players who
Mhm.
should be able to stay more consistent. If they can do that, I think they're a legit contender. Lindor will still be there, who has shown his worth this year. They have some great pieces. But I think they have some work to do in this offseason. But it's a good start. I think a lot of people didn't have them getting in. I think I had them as a fringe wild card team, but they had a nice little year. They have definitely some pieces to build on. So yes, the Mets. It was a good run. It was fun baseball to watch. I will say that.